Anyways, I'm doing a presentation on HF digital communications, digital modes, and this is going to be a high level look at PSK-31 and FT8. Obviously, there's dozens of others digital modes, but I figured I'd just cover, the most popular ones right now. Anyways, what is digital mode? Digital mode is a transmission of digital signal over radio, such as text or images. And to clarify, Fusion D-Star DMR, while digital signal is not considered digital mode because it is encoding analog data, voice. There are many digital modes on HF, like RIDI, Pactor, JT65, etc. But the two most popular HF digital modes today on HF are PSK-31 and FT8. And FT8 has become really popular. You hear it all the time on the radio. In this presentation, we will cover the PSK-31 and FT8 and provide basic information to get you started. We're not going to get into any of the technical, nitty gritty. We're just doing a high level. First, we're going to cover PSK-31. And the reason why I put the B in parentheses there is because not all the time the B is cut off, but if you're using the digital software, the B is in there. But it stands for binary phase shift keying, and is actually at 31.25 hertz. The binary data, ones and zeros, are transmitted by phase shifting an audio tone. One is phase shifted 180 degrees from zero. It was developed by Peter Martinez, G3PLX, and was introduced to the wider amateur radio community in 1998. It has become one of the most popular keyboard-to-keyboard digital modes. Keyboard-to-keyboard means that you are chatting with somebody by typing messages on the keyboard, like instant messenger. It occupies very small bandwidth, approximately 100 hertz, allowing for multiple signals to occupy the same space as a single voice channel. It offers effective communications at low power, as it is efficient with RF energy due to low bandwidth usage. However, it does not have any error correction, and the transmission rate is slow, about 3.5 characters per second. For most people, that's slow enough that keep up with the typing on that. What do you need to do PSK-31? Well, obviously, you'll need to have an HF radio if you're transmitting on HF. You could, in theory, do PSK-31 on other areas besides HF. You'll need a computer with a sound card. You'll need software to encode and decode the signal, and W1HKJ's Fldigi is a popular choice. It's not the only choice, it's the one that I'm familiar with, so that's what I use. It's available for Windows, Linux, and Mac, and I've used both the Windows and the Mac version without any issues. And it can be downloaded from W1HKJ.com. And you don't have to have this additional hardware, but this makes things easier. You can use a signal link or similar device. MFJ has an audio device similar to the signal link, which is a dedicated USB sound card that interfaces with the radio. The advantage of having that is it makes it easier controlling the audio level. With PSK-31, you could literally, have your computer sitting next to the radio, and it will translate whatever it hears from the speaker, and you can just hold your microphone up and while you're transmitting to pick up the signal from your computer speaker. Obviously, if you have the signal link, keeping the audio levels constant would be much easier. The CAT rig control cable keeps the radio and software in sync. So if you change frequencies, the software will know, and you can also control the radio from the software. To configure your radio for PSK-31, you turn your radio to the appropriate PSK-31 frequency for the band you are operating on. And we'll have a chart coming up showing what those frequencies are. You want to set your radio power output to 30 watts or less. With digital modes, you typically do not want to transmit a high power because that has a tendency of distorting your signal or making the signal very noisy, polluting the neighborhood on the band, and you make other people really mad at you. You set your radio to USB data mode. If your radio does not, there's a lot of newer radios have what's called USB data mode. What that is a clean microphone input. It doesn't have any processing or any filtering on it. So if your radio does not have that mode, you can set to USB and turn off any filters or processors that could distort the mic input. because obviously you don't want to be adjusting the digital signal, um, by some kind of filter. You want to tune your antenna and then adjust your computer audio level so the input and output isn't too hot. And how you do that depends on your computer, depends on what devices you're using. There are several different variables that you would have to, that would be different depending on what computer you have, what operating system, what sound card, what device you're using. First time you load Fldigi, you get these config screens. But before you do that, if you're using the CAT cable or the signal link, you want to have those plugged in first. That way the software will be able to detect them and you have the options. The first time you start Fldigi, a series of config screens will pop up. Only populate the screens that apply to your setup. So on the first screen, you enter your call sign, your name, your location, what antenna you're using. And these things can be changed later on if you want to. A grid square. Sound setup. If you're not using a signal link or a similar sound card, set your computer's internal microphone and the speakers for the playback. You would want to turn off your system sounds so they don't interfere. Okay. If you're using a signal link or similar USB sound card, configure your computer playback to use the USB audio codec for the microphone and speakers. And set the device shared by audio alerts and RX monitor to use the default speaker options. Because Fldigi can be programmed to play alerts and stuff whenever things are, if a CQ is detected, it'll play a sound. Lastly, you need to check that your USB sound device is not listed as a default audio device under the sound settings in your control panel on your operating system. Because if you were to get an email alert, your radio will start transmitting. So that would be under the control in Windows, the control panel under sound, and then you can see what your default sound settings. Windows is really notorious for saying, hey, you plug something in, that must be the default device. In this case, you don't want Windows to set your signal link as default device. That will come to bite you. Rig control setup. If you're using the CAT rig control cable, you first want to find out what COM port is set to, and you do that in your control panel's device manager on Windows. And off the top of my head, I can't tell you how to do that on Mac or Linux. Actually, Linux, you just do an ls of the device folder, and you pretty much guess what it is from there. You will need a rig description file for your radio. You'll need to Google that. And that's just an XML file that defines the commands and stuff that the rig control will send to your radio. Not all radios are supported under RigCat. You may need to configure your radio using HamLab, which is another tab on this setup. So there's two different ways that Fldigi controls radios. With me, I have a 450D. It's pretty easy to configure using RigCat. And make sure that the CAT settings match the CAT settings on your radio. So on your radio, you should have some screens under the menu somewhere where you set the baud rate, stop bits, etc. Those will have to match up with what you set on the radio. And that will, of course, vary depending on what radio you're using. PSK-31 frequencies. Now, there are several other options, but the main ones is these 21. 1407, 707, 3.58, 2107, and you got 17 meters, 12 meters, and 10 meters. Actually, I've only made PSK-31 contacts myself on 15, 20, and 40, and I've done it on 80 during the winter field day a couple of years ago. This year I was only on 20 and 40. PSK-31. The main Fldigi screen, the top of it is kind of like a control area where it shows your frequencies, what mode you're using, and also has some buttons for logging, looking up the call sign of the station you're talking to, and then all the fields that you see on the top there are used to populate the logbook. These fields can be automatically populated by querying QRZ, ham call, etc. So if you have a subscription with QRZ, you click on the little Earth icon, looks like the Earth, it will automatically populate all the information about the station you're talking to. The waterfall at the bottom screen controls, it shows you signals that you can select, or you can select a free spot to transmit from. And it's hard to see on the screen here, but there's a couple of signals I'm picking up at this time. When I took a screenshot, there wasn't much PSK-31 activity going on. The output windows and the bottom of this cut off, but I'll just. So the left white box I have box there, that shows the different messages or signals that are found on the scope. So you see the individual signals going down as a blue bar. Well, the text will start scrolling across the screen. You can select text, and that will set your radio to have a conversation with that particular station. So when you click on the scrolling text, the signal will be highlighted, selected on the waterfall, and then you're ready to hopefully have a QSO with that station. The blue input window is where you type your message and macros are applied. Transmit and receive mode can be triggered by the transmit receive button located near the bottom right of the screen. Macros can also be triggered. The macros can also trigger the transmit and receive. And the bottom of this text is being cut off, so oh well. The macros, if you left click on the macros, it will add the macro to the output screen. Some of these macros will automatically start transmitting, so just keep that in mind when you're randomly clicking stuff on the on Fldigi. You're not ready to transmit. If you right click on the macro, it will give you an edit screen. This is a sample of the CQ macro, and you can see there's fields there like TX that tells start transmitting. My call is your call sign. Call is the station you're talking to's call sign. Answering a CQ. Stations calling CQ will show up in red in the white monitor window. You click on the CQ transmission either in the white monitor window or in the waterfall. So if you click on the signal on the waterfall, it will select that signal. The signal will now be selected in the waterfall, and the transmission text will start streaming in the yellow output window. You click on the CQing station's call sign. So in the output window, when you get a clear call sign, when it's done drawing on the screen, click on it. The station's call sign will now appear in the call sign field on the top of the Fldigi screen. It will also be populated in the call field in the macros. You click the Earth icon to look up the details if Fldigi is configured to query a lookup service. When I was doing winter field day, I kept forgetting about clicking on the call sign because I was in a hurry, and then when you go to CQ, it's CQ in the previous stations that you talk to. So you want to remember to click the call sign of the person that's coming through on the stream so that Fldigi knows who you're talking to. So I'm going to show you an actual sample QSO I had. Okay, and so I see, this station coming through. Notice there's no error correction, so the second CQ there has a plus sign. So it's CQ, CQ, DE, W5BIL, W5BIL, CQ, CQ, DE, 5BIL, will K. So some distortion there. You can see I click over the I click that call sign, and then I click on the answer macro, and that macro automatically starts to transmit 5 W5BIL, 5 W5BIL, DE, N3VQW, DE, N3VQW, N3VQW, KN, and it stops transmitting. And then the station responds. So this is streaming in onto the screen. N3VQW, DE5, W5BIL, thanks for the call. Report 579 near Galveston, and just continues on with his little information about his location, his name. And you notice that oftentimes people will repeat things, his name twice, his call signs, because that's just in case I'm not receiving the signal very well. It increases the chances of me deciphering what's being said. Remember, there is no error correction. Then he asked me how I copy, and this is back to you, N3VQW, DE5, W5BIL. Okay. So I click the QSO button. And what that button does is it transmits call, DE, your call, and then keeps transmitting. This gives you the place to start typing. So it will keep transmitting, and you start typing your response. Or you can use a macro like the meqth or brag. And that you can have the meqth. You can say I live in Cincinnati, and brag me. I have a 450D. I have a 3,000 watt transmitter. Whatever. I have this. I have that. Just whatever you want to brag about. So that could be a pre-programmed response, or you could just type away. And so here, after I click QSO, it automatically does the 5BILDE N3VQW, and I start typing. And forgive my horrible typing here, but I say I copy 599. I'm working on a presentation on PSK-31 and taking screenshots for my presentation. The bands have been pretty poor lately, plus lots of FT8 interference, laugh out loud. I'm transmitting 30 watts from a 450D on a 5B TV antenna. Then I click the KN macro. The KN macro adds BTU, call, DE, my call, K, and ends the transmission. So then it transmits BTU, 5BILDE, and 3VQW, K, and stops transmitting. He responds, George, is the presentation for school class. Do you teach? Back to you in 3VQW, DE, 5BILK. I click QSO, and I say, does the W5BIL, DE, and 3VQW. No, this presentation is for, notice I spelled for wrong, oh well, the Okine Amateur Radio Society Club meeting on the first Tuesday of the month. I will be presenting in March. I brought the idea for a topic, therefore I had automatically volunteered myself. Laugh out loud. I'm having fun getting the content together, however my computer has been giving me issues. I figured it out because when I leave my radio on I left my radio on another VFO mode. These changes aren't reflected in Fldigi because of the other mode. Laugh out loud, facepalm, KN. Oh, and also the location of the button got changed because we're using Google here, but I'm also using a signal link and USB cat cable along with the Fldigi software. Then I hit KN, it goes back to you. Now, one of the things I had discovered quite accidentally is I have programmed the OSSBN net into a frequency into one of my memory channels. So when I go into that, it leads it into a different mode. So when I connect to Fldigi, the cat no longer works. And I was trying to figure out why in the world is it no longer working? It was just working. And I realized, and then I figured it out, is I have to be in VFO mode 1, 1 in order for it to communicate. If you change the radio into another VFO, it doesn't work anymore. So that's one of the things I learned during this presentation. So now I know. Sounds like fun, George. Well, good luck with your presentation and at the meeting. It was great chatting with you, sir. N3VQW DE5 W star BIL. So there's, a distortion there, no error correction. And he basically signs off and uses a timestamp, etc. I say click. I click on QSO, W5BIL, DE N3VQW. Then I click the silent key button, SK. SK macro adds the thanks for the QSO name. Now, if you name will be blank here because I didn't have the QRZ lookup, so I didn't have his name programmed in the field. But by default, it will say thanks for the QSO name 73. God bless. Date, time, call, DE, my call, and terminates the transmission. So that's the default. You can edit whatever you want it to say. And so it says thanks for the QSO 73. God bless. And then it puts the timestamp, which is useful to have. W5BIL, DE, and 3VQW. And then I click the little icon, shows this entry again saved into the log, and it saves it into Fldigi's log. Now, I would recommend you keep the timestamp on because I ended up having used them on Winter Field Day when Chezzy's computer died, and I lost 20 entries. And so I had to recreate them from the output of the text. So I was able to recreate the log of the context I had already made when that happened. So calling CQ, select a free spot on the waterfall, click the RSID CQ macro, which is what does CQ, DE, my call, and it does it twice, ends with the PSK, and stops the transmission. When the station replies to your CQ, click on the station's call sign so that it populates the call sign field and can be used in macros and logbook. Then click the QSO macro and proceed with the QSO like you did in the previous demonstration. PSK-31 tips. You don't need to worry about typing fast enough to keep up with with the transmission rate, the radio will wait for you. It will keep transmitting, and it will just sit there waiting for you to type. You can also sometimes do backspace too. Macros help with the repetitive stuff. Make sure you edit your brag and me QTH macros so that you don't have to type about your radio setup every single time you talk to somebody. Don't forget to log your QSOs, and don't forget to save changes to your config or macros if prompted when you exit Fldigi. So if you make a change to your config or your macros and you exit it, and you say no, well, guess what? Your changes won't be there the next time you open Fldigi. So, okay, now we're going to FT8. FT8 stands for Frank Taylor Design 8-FSK modulation. Unlike PSK-31, FT8 uses frequency shift keying. The frequency is shifted to encode the ones and zeros of the digital information. With FT8, you are restricted to very small messages, limited to 13 characters per message, and is transmitted at 1 character per second. There are 4 slots per minute in which the sender and receiver radios take turn transmitting and listening. Because of this, accurate time synchronization is important. FT8 is very capable of receiving weak signals in very poor band conditions. FT8 communication is typically computer-controlled sequence messages, in which sending and receiving computers handle the entire QSO automatically. Now you can do the sequence manually, but in most cases it would do it automatically. What do you need to do FT8? Well, you need to have an HF radio to transmit on HF bands, obviously. A signal link or similar USB sound card. Some newer radios have the USB sound cards built in. This will allow you to better control the transmit and receive audio levels. FT8 is much more finicky about audio levels than PSK-31 is. The CAT cable for rig control, which is, I believe, is optional. A way to keep accurate time on your computer. And notice how I have your operating system's automatic time sync crossed off. Chezzy, is there a reason for that? He's laughing. It's not very accurate because your computer only checks its time maybe once a day, if at all. And your computer's time will drift, and it will drift by it might not, by maybe a second or two. That's more than enough to make FT8 not work. So a lot of people like to use a GPS. And the reason for that is because if they're out in the field, they're not going to have internet connection at time sync. Or you can use time synchronization software such as NetTime. That's why I downloaded it to use. And that will keep my time accurate within milliseconds. I have it set to check like every 15 minutes. Dimension 4, okay. There's just a bunch of them out there. You just Google it and yeah. So there's a lot of options out there. But with FT8, time synchronization is critical. The WSJT-X software, WSJT-X software, which has versions available for Windows, Linux, and Mac. And this is the software that was developed by the people that developed FT8. There may be some other options out there, but everybody uses this. And you download it from physics.princeton.edu/pulsar/k1jt/WSJTX.html. You could just Google it. It'd be like the first link that comes up. Setting up WSJT-X. Open WSJT-X. Now, unlike Fldigi, it won't automatically prompt you to set things up. So you have to go to the settings under the file menu. On the general tab, the minimum you have to enter is your call sign and your grid square number. There are a bunch of different settings that do different things, different configurations. I'm not going to get into most of those. This FT8 can be an entire presentation on its own. Setting up CAT control. Click on the radio tab. Select your radio under the rig drop down. It has a lot of radios in there. Select the serial port for your CAT cable. And select the correct settings for your radio serial ports. Setting up audio. Click the audio tab. So we're just going over to the right here. Select the correct device for the sound card input and output. And for the signal link, you would select the microphone, USB audio codec, speaker, USB audio codec. And I would assume that the MFJ would use something similar because it's probably just a generic USB audio codec. And then under the mode menu, you select FT8 under the mode menu, so that it knows that you actually want to use FT8. By default, it's set to JT9. And there's basically two windows. You have the waterfall window, and I don't think they call it the waterfall window. I'm just going to call it that myself. And then what I call the main window. Yeah, it's a waterfall. Okay, I have highlighted in the window to in the main screen, top left window. That's the monitor. That when the monitor is enabled, which is by default. You can see there's a green button that says monitor. It's green because it's enabled. The messages will appear in the band activity window. So that will start showing all the messages that it sees on band. The RX frequency window shows messages that are on the frequency that you have selected. And you can select this frequency by selecting them on the waterfall, or by clicking one of the messages that you see coming in on the monitor on the left. There's a sequence of text TX messages, transmit messages, 1 through 5 and 6. 6 is the CQ message. So that's the sequence that Fldigi will transmit. Right now it's blank. That's because I haven't selected a station to talk to yet. When you select a station, it will automatically populate that with the standard messages, which is basically it would be a CQ message, or no, not CQ, a response to a CQ if you're selecting a station. It'll be your signal report, response to a signal report, and a 73, I believe. On this area of the screen highlighted in the red box are controls that allow you to change the band and change the behavior of the application. Selecting the band, there's a drop down that shows 20 meters, 40 meters, etc. Selecting that band will automatically set your radio to the FT8 frequency on that band. So I don't have a frequency chart here, but that's because the WSJT-X software will automatically set the frequency for you. And if you have a CAT cable, it will control the radio and set the frequency on the radio. So changing the frequency in the drop down will automatically set your radio. And it's usually, like 14.074, 7.074, similar pattern. Different settings. There's a checkbox that says auto sequence. When checked, WSJT-X will automatically sequence through the QSO. This is enabled by default. The whole transmit frequency. When checked, WSJT-X will keep your transmit frequency on the selected transmit frequency, even if a responding station is on another frequency. Unchecked, WSJT-X will adjust the transmit frequency to that of the receiving frequency. So if somebody comes back to you and you don't have that checked, it will actually go to the frequency of the station that came back to you. That's considered bad. That's considered bad form, yes. Yes. There's a lot of opinions about this. I was like, I'm not going to get into that. Call first. When checked, WSJ-X will respond to the first decoded responder to your CQ. So if someone responds to it, it'll automatically respond to that. Or you can have that disabled, and you could just, if you see multiple stations responding to your CQ, you can pick whichever one you want to respond to. Now the TX even / first, when checked, WSJT-X will transmit on the first and third time sequences of the minute. This is automatically set when you select a message on the band, because every minute there are 4 time slots. And so what this does is you will transmit on 1 or the third time slot, or you transmit on the 2nd and the 4th time slot in that minute. Remember, the time slots are 15 seconds long. 13 of them is actually transmitting data, your characters and your data.
A real quick note about that.
Yes.
I found it useful if I don't see any new calls to uncheck that button so I can see kind of the other side of the time sequence. And a lot of times you'll see different calls there. in particular big events like field day and digital contests.
Yes, and the software will automatically check or uncheck that depending on what the station that you're contacting has they're set to. Because if it's not synchronized, you'll be transmitting over when they're transmitting. So to respond to a CQ, on the band activity window, double-click on the CQ message you wish to respond to. WSJT-X will automatically set your receive frequency to that of the CQing stations if that checkbox is, whatever. The T1, the transmit 1 through 5 standard messages will automatically populate. Hit the Enable Transmit button. Now, after you hit this button, your CQ message will appear in the RX window with a yellow background. So it's not really CQ message. Your message back to the station, to the CQing station, will appear yellow background text with a yellow background. If the CQing station responds to you, the CQing station responses will have a red background. So that's how you know that you're getting responses. If all of a sudden you see this box comes up with a red background, this is very visual. You're like, yeah, I got somebody. Now, if somebody else responds to the CQing station, it will disable the transmit button. The software will automatically step through the sequence, so you don't have to do anything. You're just there for the ride and watch it. Sometimes you have to manually change the sequence if for some reason the other station is using a non-standard message that will confuse the software, so it doesn't know how to respond. So, but I've actually haven't seen that recently. Did on field day, but on field days in the past. But for the most part, it will automatically sequence to the entire queue. So, calling CQ. You set the frequency you want to transmit and receive on in the waterfall display. And in the waterfall display, if you click on an area on the screen on the waterfall display, that sets your receive frequency. Shift click sets the transmit frequency, and if you do a control click, it will set the RX and transmit frequency on the same spot. You want to make sure that the whole TX frequency auto sequence in call first is selected. And then in the transmit message list, make sure that TX6 is selected, which is your CQ message. Or you can push F4 to automatically do that. And then you click Enable TX. And then the software will transmit your CQ, listen for 15 seconds, and repeat. If another station responds, the software will automatically sequence to the messages 2 through 5. And that will complete your QSO. I'm just going to start saying the software because WSJT-X is too much. Here's a sample QSO. And I did all the extra work to show what colors everything would be in. So station was calling CQ, and you can see the CQ is in green. And then I respond, and you can see there's the time, there's the timestamp, what it is transmit, shows a little signal report information. Grid square, and then the call sign and the actual message. So the CQ XE3E EK37, that is the message from the CQing station. By the way, this is one in Mexico. And then the response is their call sign, my call sign, EM79, which is the grid square. And then he responds, so you can see he has a red background. And he says N3VQW XE3E -17. And then my computer responds, XE3E N3VQW R -04. And then he responds with saying, received in 73s, and then comes back with a 73. That's a completed QSO. And these signal reports, I thought about putting a little chart, try to explain those, but it turns out it's a little bit more complicated than that. Right, Chezzy? Yep. So I was like, if you really want to know what those numbers mean, Google it. Because
it's basically, as long as it's not below -18.
Yeah, if it's not.
The floor of the software, I believe, is right around -18, -20 decibels.
Yeah.
So if you see someone above -18, then you're probably
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, you'll very rarely see positive numbers on the signal reports.
I
Very
usually
rare.
see those from Steve Weeks, who lives.
Yeah,
in
if
my
they're right next to you. So -17 isn't necessarily, I mean, it's,
Under his noise.
yeah, you're down near his noise floor. So, but he heard me, and I do believe I was on my end fed when I was doing this. So it slopes in completely opposite direction from Mexico. So, it's pretty good. FT8 tips: don't forget to log your QSO by hitting the log QSO button. If you hear signals but nothing is showing up in the band monitor, you need to check your audio levels, because if they're not right, it's not going to be able to decode. And also check that your computer's time is in sync. Remember, time synchronization is critical. And also, another little useful little thing that I discovered is all the QSOs and the log file is stored under on Windows, your user data folder, app data, local WSJT-X is a text file called all.txt. It has all the QSOs that you've done in there. So if you wanted to go back and it's more than all the QSOs, it's all the messages it saw. So if you want to you would have to piece back together your QSO by searching for stuff, but it does record everything. Yeah, you could do that too. Resources. I found this document online, Gary Hinson's FT8 operational guide. It's an excellent guide to getting set up and using FT8, and I went through that. It has a lot of information about adjusting your audio levels, and does a bit more detailed about what some of the other settings are for FT8. I would highly recommend, if you want to get started with FT8, to Google that, Gary Hinson's FT8 operational guides, because I found that very useful. PSK Reporter is a website, pskreporter.info, shows a map of the world, and it shows balloons of every station that has reported on the internet seeing your PSK or your FT8 signal. It's very useful, because then I can actually see, I see the station calling, from Japan, but they're not responding to me. Why? Well, I go there, and I can see that all my signals are going either south or to the east. I'm getting, Europe and South America is hearing me, but not. So, well, I'll switch my antenna. I'll go over to the 5B TV, and then a few minutes later, after transmitting some, I can see now Australia and Japan are hearing me. So that gives you an idea of of where you're being heard, and it color codes different bands too. 40 meters blue, 15 yellow, and 17's like brown or something. So I forget what colors they are. 15's brown, 20's yellow. So that is a useful website if you're using PSK-31 or FT8. See who's hearing you, even if no one's coming back to your CQs, or not coming back to you, responding to their CQs. Fldigi is on w1hkj.com. WSJT-X, JT-X is the physics princeton.edu, Pulsar H1JT, and again, you could just Google it. And then in the time sync software I used for this, putting this presentation together, was NetTime. But again, there's dozens of options for keeping your time synchronization set. So that's my last slide. Does anybody have any questions?
All right, thank you, George.